Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda. I'm Nick Park, and I'm taking us through a series of teachings where we are looking at the Old Testament, and we're looking at every book of the Old Testament and seeing how Jesus is revealed again and again in the Old Testament, which helps us have a greater understanding of who Jesus is when we read the New Testament. And Jesus himself is the key to understanding both the Old Testament and the New Testament. So it all hangs together, the Bible and Jesus. He is the living word, the incarnate word, and the Bible is the written word of God. And we're in 2 Kings now. And, 2 Kings, it's named 2 Kings, but it's not primarily about kings. In fact, it's more about prophets than it is about kings, because there's kings in it, but the two key figures in the book of 2 Kings are Elijah and Elisha. And we see them great parallels between Elijah and Elisha and Jesus. In many ways, they prefigured and foreshadowed many of the things that Jesus would do, but Jesus did them in a greater way. So, for example, when it came to walking across water, in 2 Kings chapter 2, Elijah hit the water with his cloak, so the water parted, which for the Israelites, it would have reminded them of the parting of the Red Sea or the Jordan River being dried up so that Joshua could lead the people into the promised land. But Elijah parted the water with his cloak, and Elisha actually did the same thing. After Elijah had ascended into heaven in a whirlwind, Elisha came, took that cloak, that mantle, and said, "Where now is the God of Elijah?" and struck the river, and the same thing happened. But you know what? Jesus didn't have to part the water. Jesus walked on the water in Matthew chapter 14. And then also Elijah ascended into heaven in a whirlwind. He was one of only two people in the Old Testament, in fact, right up to Jesus, who went to be with God without actually tasting death at all. The other one, apart from Elijah, was Enoch. But Jesus didn't need a whirlwind to ascend into heaven. He ascended into heaven in his own glory and power at the end of Luke, beginning of the book of Acts. Elisha fed 100 men with 20 loaves. There was an incident in 2 Kings chapter 4 where a man brought 20 loaves of bread and some corn, and they made a stew, and they said, "Well, look, there's 100 people here. This isn't going to be enough," but it multiplied miraculously. Well, Elisha fed 100 men with 20 loaves. Jesus fed 5,000 men with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. So again, he did it in a much greater measure. Elisha healed a leper, Naaman, in 2 Kings chapter 5. Jesus healed 10 lepers in one go in Luke chapter 17. Elisha had supernatural knowledge about Gehazi, his servant, that after God had healed Naaman of his leprosy, and Gehazi secretly took a gift from Naaman and didn't tell Elisha. And Elisha said, "Do you not think the Spirit of God showed me where you were going and what you were doing?" So he had supernatural knowledge. But John chapter 2 tells us Jesus knew, not just in the heart of one man, it says Jesus knew what was in the heart of men. Elijah raised somebody from the dead. He raised the son of the widow of Zarephath from the dead. That was Elijah. Elisha raised 2 people from the dead, the son of the Shunammite woman, and also after his death, that there were some people conducting a funeral, and there was some Moabite raiders came, so they didn't have time to dig the grave, so they threw the dead body into Elisha's tomb, and the body touched Elisha's bones and came to life again and ran after them away from the Moabites. He didn't want to get killed again. But Jesus raised the son of the widow of Nain. Jesus raised Jairus' daughter. Jesus raised Lazarus. And also at the time of Christ's crucifixion, it says in Matthew 25, verses 51 to 53, "The earth shook, the rocks split, and the tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many people." And then, of course, Jesus himself was raised from the dead. And you know what we say? Well, did somebody else do that for him? No. The book of Hebrews tells us it was by the blood of the eternal covenant, his own blood, that Jesus was raised from the dead. So you could say he raised himself. And of course, one day we will all be raised to new life because he is the first fruits of the resurrection of the dead. So in every measure we look at, Jesus did all the miraculous things that Elijah and Elisha did, but he did them to a much greater degree and measure because he was the one that they were simply pointing the way to. Thank you for joining us today. Join us again tomorrow for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda.